I was born a cradle Catholic in the Bronx, New York. I went to St. Francis de Chantal, where my baptism, my first confession, and my first communion were held. I went to St. Francis School until the 5th grade, and I was an altar boy. I was identified as an Irish Catholic. I stopped practicing our faith when I went to college. I graduated from UC San Diego. I got a job and just began having a good time. That whole experience was kind of boring for me, and I'd always wanted to travel. So after 2 years of working, I quit my job, I sold my car, I ended my lease in my apartment, and I bought a one-way ticket to Europe. I spent a year traveling in Europe and the Middle East, and then after that, I came back home. I got a job and let the good times roll again. Before I left for Europe, I met a girl. She was different than the rest. Patricia was steadfast in our faith, went to Mass daily, and there was something really attractive about that to me. We were dating for about 5 years on and off again, and basically at the end of this 5 years, she wanted to go home for her father's 70th birthday party. Patricia is the youngest of 10, and she wanted to surprise her father in Dublin. So she went, but there was one little problem. Her J1 visa had expired. So she knew it was going to be risky to get back into the US. But she wanted to go and surprise her dad. So she went, and lo and behold, she couldn't come back to the US. This misfortune turned out to be a blessing, because what happened was that her father was diagnosed terminally. So Patricia was able to spend the last months of her father's life with him. And it was really a wonderful experience, and something she really believes was just a true blessing. After the mourning period and some time, Patricia went to the Algarve in Portugal to sell timeshares. So during that time, I was in San Diego, Patricia in Portugal. We would correspond occasionally with letters and occasional phone calls. And at one of these phone calls, I said to Patricia, this is kind of unfair to both of us, and I think we should figure this out. And I said, what do you think about me coming to Portugal to see you in the Algarve? Now, I got to tell you about Patricia. She's a real cool customer. She simply said, if you like. Now, this wasn't exactly the signal I was looking for. I was looking for something stronger. But I'm a bit of a risk taker, so I went to Portugal. It was there that I proposed to Patricia. So then I went back home to San Diego, and Patricia went to Dublin to start preparing for the wedding with her 7 sisters and her mom. Pretty much daily phone calls that occurred after that while she was in Dublin and I was in San Diego. And on one of these phone calls, Patricia said to me, matter-of-factly, you need to go back to Mass now. So I clumsily said, okay, I'll go back to Mass. So I started going to Mass on Sunday. We were married in Dublin, Ireland at University Church, and it was July 6, 1991. I better remember that. And so the wedding was great, and we started going to Mass every Sunday from that point on. Mass was a routine for us on Sunday. We have 2 children. We did the best we could to raise them in our faith. They went K through 12 to Catholic school, and our youngest is at Gonzaga University now. And I pray every single day that they retain our faith. As I was saying, Mass was a routine for us, and actually a routine for me. Routine in the wrong sense of the word. I simply was going to Mass. It was the extent of my Catholic expression. I was really my faith was my tradition and my cultural identity. And this continued on until about 5 years ago when I lost my job. And this happened just before Ash Wednesday. So Patricia just basically said, hey, why don't you just go to Mass today? And I said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I have something to pray for. I need a job. So I went to OLMC Parish for a daily Mass just before Ash Wednesday. And then I went the next day. And it seemed like a really great way to start the job search. Made me feel good, and that's what I did. And I continued going to daily Mass all during that Lent. Lo and behold, at the end of Lent, just before Easter Sunday, I got rehired by the same company that let me go in a different division. And I could not deny it. My prayers had been answered. So one of the great benefits of this was I started really enjoying daily Mass. So I will tell you that me personally, I prefer daily Mass to Sunday Mass. I feel like I'm going to upper division classes. And I highly encourage any of you, if you have the time, to go to daily Mass. It's at 8 o'clock. If you can squeeze it into your schedule, I tell you, it's really worth it. And I really enjoy it. Another thing that happened was a call to action from Father. And he talked about, in one of his homilies, putting our faith in action. So he said it wasn't good enough. He challenged us. It wasn't good enough to just go to Sunday Mass and to put our coins into the basket each Sunday. And he had a specific call to action. Father's really good at this, if you haven't noticed. And the call to action was about our neighbors in PQ Village. Now, for those of you who may not know, PQ Village is just down the hill here. It was basically low-income housing, 332 low-income housing units. And these were our neighbors, as Father called them. And his specific call to action was that he wanted us to attend this first meeting to try to figure out how we could help our neighbors. So right at that homily, I decided I was going to go. His appeal really caught me. So I went to the first meeting, and the first meeting was kind of awkward. No one knew who we were. There wasn't really a strategy. It was sort of like, what are we doing, and we didn't really have a sense of it. But there was enough substance there for me to go to the second meeting, and then many meetings after that. Initially, this was an interesting group. We were parishioners, and we were PQ Village residents. The PQ Village residents were very nervous, so the most vocal of them were constantly coming to this weekly meeting we had right over there, actually. And so what happened was, as time went by, we were strategizing, preparing for things, trying to figure out what to do, how we could help the residents to the best of our ability. So what began as the parishioners and the PQ residents, that slowly basically went away. There was an indistinguishable group called Save PQ Village that came out of this, and you may have heard of us, Save PQ Village. So what we did was, you can imagine the poor and the elderly were terrified. They didn't have any idea what was going on. The developer and the management company were going to demolish PQ Village if they could, and then redevelop it. They were going to take what was currently mostly Section 8 housing and turn it into market rate housing. So that means they were going to displace everybody down there, and then even when it was rebuilt, which you can see is going on now, none of those residents would be able to move here. So basically, this entire journey was a 2-year journey for us. And basically, there was so much support from so many parishioners that I was, quite frankly, it was awe-inspiring. And our overall focus was always to produce the best outcome for the residents. One particular incident that really struck me, it was one of these, we would constantly survey PQ Village. So we would go through the village, and we would try to find out needs and then update the residents as to what was going on with the latest developments of where we were. So at first we used to go 2 together because we were kind of unsure of what we were doing. But after a while, we'd done this so many times that we were doing our routes solo because we were able to cover wider territory faster. So I was about an hour into my route this one particular night, and it was a summer night. And I went to this front door, and the stoop had oxygen tanks all over the front of the stoop, and they were used oxygen tanks. And so there was a screen door, and I knocked on the screen door, and this voice from inside simply said, "Come in." The voice didn't say, "Who is that? What do you want?" It was, "Come in." So I went to the screen door, and I went to reach for it, and it was unlocked. And I opened the screen door, and when I got inside the tiny cottage, I saw the back of a woman. She was laboriously breathing, probably from a combination of her condition and the heat. She was tethered to an oxygen tank. And then the next thing she said to me was, "Sit down," at her kitchen table. Now, again, she doesn't know who I am. She can't see me because her back is to me, and she tells me to sit down. I sit down, I introduce myself to her, and I ask her if she's fully aware of the latest situation that's going on here. I want to get a sense of, maybe I can share some things with her. Now, the saga of PQ Village at this particular time was completely unknown. We had no idea. We didn't know what was going on. We were just trying to figure it out as we went along. But there were so many questions that were obvious for the residents. You would think, they'd want to know, well, what do you know? What's the latest? Where are we going to go? What's all that? She simply said to me, no, we just have to move. That's all she said, was we have to move. So then I said, well, do you mind if I ask you some questions in case we can't save PQ Village? Maybe we could find out what kind of needs you might have. Like, for example, do you know where you'd move to, or do you need help finding a place to move to? And then, if you were to move, do you need help moving? And to every question, she simply said to me, that would be nice. So, you think about this. The woman's world is upside down. She has no idea what's happening next. She's thankful for any kind of offering of help I can give her. And all she's saying to me is, that would be nice, that would be nice. I mean, personally, I don't know about you guys, but I'd be pretty upset about what was happening around me. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was simply thankful. When I left, I felt helpless. I felt angry. I felt ashamed. And I also felt invigorated by her. You knew you were doing the right thing during this whole process, but now I fully understood the reason why. While sitting at countless kitchen tables in PQ Village, I was always touched by the thankfulness of the PQ residents. And there was one funny thing that always happened. They were always thankful for their place where they lived, the space around them, and nature. Now I got to tell you, when I was at PQ Village, all I saw was squirrels. Where I'm from in the Bronx, a squirrel is a rat with a furry tail, okay? And all I could hear was freeway noise, varmints and freeway noise. And they're thankful for the space that they have between the cottages and the nature that was there. Again, I felt guilty about their genuine appreciation. Our lobbying efforts became in earnest. We did things way outside of our comfort zone. We lobbied one-on-one every single city council member in the city, some more than once. We organized PR events. We aligned with radical political groups that I would have nothing in common with, only because they had a similar interest in helping the people at PQ Village. We were constantly strategizing. We prepped for city planning presentations. We were involved with press events. We were organizing supporters constantly. We had presentation development after presentation development. We were negotiating directly with key top executives from Lennar, who is the development company. And these negotiations, I have to tell you, were super, super intense. We were always focused on the best outcome for the residents. In the end, the other side agreed to provide 115 low-income housing units, which they had no intention of doing in the beginning. They also guaranteed that every Section 8 resident would be given another Section 8 housing unit in San Diego. And I have to tell you, it wasn't just you're going to go over here. If the resident didn't like that choice for some reason, they would give them another choice. And some of our residents were pretty aggressive and they went for a third choice. So it was pretty fascinating to watch this, but every Section 8 resident was guaranteed another place. Everyone really got a much better place than they had previously had. The other low-income housing residents who were not Section 8 were given up to $4,000 each. And this was to cover the cost of moving and the higher rents that they would now have to start paying, parts of that. And then the moving expenses for everyone was covered. But for the Section 8 residents, there was a $500 stipend, and or they would move you. So we wanted to turn that $500 stipend into a $500 bonus for all the Section 8 residents. So we started a moving company, and we started moving people from PQ Village. Mike, I don't know how many U-Hauls you drove, but I drove a bunch of U-Hauls, and we were constantly doing this weekend after weekend. The final outcome was far better for everyone. The residents were happy and grateful. The City Council praised us and the work of Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish. And interestingly, the main representative for the development company wrote us a heartfelt letter thanking us. For many people, Save PQ Village was a powerful witness to the sincerity of the church's commitment to the poor, and we honored the name of the church's Lord, Jesus Christ. It was clear that the Holy Spirit was working within us. Our faith was in action. Hopefully, we can all be open to God's call to help, to be an apostle through generosity and evangelization.